Welcome to the Growth Guys Podcast, presented by KinderReeseCoaching.com. This is the #1 podcast for real estate agents who are serious about growing their business. Get the strategies and tactics to grow your business fast while building the lifestyle you dream of. Now, sit back, buckle up, and get ready, because we're about to get real. The Growth Guys Podcast starts right now.
What's up, everybody? It's Growth Guys Podcast. I'm here again with my man, John Kitchens. What's going on, John?
What's up, Mr. Kiani, man? Great being here with you again, ready to rock out another episode of the Growth Guys Podcast.
That's it. Hopefully you guys are loving our episodes today. We're excited to extend the conversation when it comes to leadership. We're going to dive in a little bit more into team leadership as opposed to kind of leading yourself, which is what we talked about in our last episode. But I'm excited to get into it today, talking about leadership. So let's get things started.
Let's jump in. Let's do it. Touch on, man. This was just an interesting concept that really, man, it really like made so much sense for me in the simplest of forms. And, we talk a lot about ego, and I even up on the board, and it was kind of a theme, for us in Cincinnati, right, Jeff? Gove talked about it, ego versus capital, right? He made the comment that some of you need to sell less homes and focus on, the greater opportunity that you have at hand. For a lot of people kind of not in that situation yet, but particular in that room, it was a relative point to the room in Cincinnati. And, Ryan Holiday, he's just one of my favorite authors. I mean, I just his thinking, I guess, from stoicism. I mean, you can see I got my daily stoic back here, that going on a couple of years now of consuming and reading every day. And, definitely his books, The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy. And I was listening to this podcast, and it was really on conscious leadership, and it really just caught my attention. And really what he broke it down to be is that in the simplest of forms, and this is kind of what they teach from a conscious leadership perspective, is that they talk about that there's this line, and you're either above the line or you're below the line. And above the line is that you're open, you're curious, you're committed to learning, you're in a sense of trust. And for us that is solution oriented, right? We're in learner mode, right? We talk learner judger. We're in learner mode. We're in growth mindset. We're in abundance mindset. We're really open. We're focused on the outcome. But below the line is you're contracted, you're closed off, you're defensive, and you're really in a position to prove you're right? We talk about that all the time, right, Jeff? It's not about being right, it's about getting to right. And so the what it really came down to is outcome over ego. And are you committed to your ego and being right, or are you open to solutions, getting to right, focused on the outcome? Man, that was such a huge get. And then they went on to talk about the 3 core wants of any ego structure, right? So we talk ego, but what is that? And and the way he broke it down, I was like, okay, that helps me understand it at a higher level. And then what he talks about from an ego structure is that there's 3 core wants. It's either we want control, we want approval, or we want survival, right? And meaning safety, security. That's when the ego structure kicks in. And so you start to think about it, right? Why am I getting defensive? Why am I contracted? Why am I closed off? Is it because I want control of what's going on? Is it because I want that approval? Is it that, I'm fighting for survival instead of, getting retracted, getting defensive instead of being solution oriented? And it was just tremendous, in the simplicity of it, but how powerful it is. And I know we talked a little bit on the last episode, Jeff, about and I definitely want to transition into, leading others, but I think this is kind of important to kind of the continuation from the previous episode when we were talking a lot about self-leadership. I think we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, and we talked about self-awareness. And, when you dive a little bit deeper with self-awareness, from the center of creative leadership and talking through this conscious leadership, focus, the top 4 core competencies that the center of creative leadership defined as, number 1 was self-awareness, 2 was learning agility, 3 was communication, and 4 was influence. And I know you've been studying a lot of Maxwell stuff as well as I have, and that's really what, Maxwell really talks about from leadership. All he talks about leadership is just the ability to influence another human being. And I think that's, will tie perfectly into our conversation today. But I want to give these nuggets because they were really powerful. To grow in self-awareness, they talk about you have to become more self-reflective. You've got to be able to pause and reflect. And how they say pause and have a conscious breath. And we talk a little bit about that. Times we've shared the story that Clayt shared with us. When they've had the kids on the trail with the Boy Scouts. Was volunteering with his kiddos, and he said, "Man, never fails, man. You've always got that kid that's gonna derail the whole situation." And they'll lock up on these hikes. And he's like, you got to get them to calm down and breathe. And, what they're talking about is you're getting a conscious breath because of the chemicals that come back into our body allows us to start to think, right? So it's that conscious breath, and then it allows you to reflect. And so I thought that was fantastic. Another way to grow in self-awareness was to use personality tests. We use that with coaching. We use, the DISC. We've used, colors. We've used there's so many different personality tests. I'm sure you've had your fair share of taking them over the years. And then the third way was to create a feedback-rich environment. And, those are some of the key things to be able to focus on if you're really committed to grow in self-awareness. And it's just really powerful. Those couple little lessons above the line, below the line, focused on outcome, focused on learning, focused on growing, versus then just so focused on our ego and being closed off and not willing to, get to the right solution instead of just so, committed to, being right more than, getting to right.
Yeah. I think, like you said, it starts with awareness. Today we're talking about leading people. Last episode, we were talking about leading yourself. We talked about how important it is to be self-aware. You're kind of diving into that with that, talking about being kind of introspective and looking inward. And when you're leading other people, it's, the same principles apply. When we were talking about, it takes a willingness to be wrong, right? When you talk about being aware, it's leading other people is you have to remember that it's really not about you, right? It's about somebody else's experience. It's about getting somebody else to do something that you want them to do you want them to want to do it. You want them to want to do it. And, how do you do that? There's a million different things. I tend to go back to, it is all about the questions. And what that does is it gives you a certain foundation where communication can take place. So, I've got to be willing to be wrong. I have to understand that leading of the team is not about me pushing my agenda. It's about us agreeing that the agenda is correct based on the goal. It's not about me getting you to do what I want you to do. It's about all of us saying, I want to do that. because that's going to take me where we all want to go. And I think, what happens is when you're not willing to be wrong, it's because you're defensive of your idea. This is my plan. This is my strategy. Oh, you're just going to follow orders. That's it. This is my plan. And while that will work, I mean, we've won wars under that method. But in an environment where you need to adapt, in a business environment, in a team environment, it's not going to work in business typically. And so you need to foster communication. And, we talk about care a lot. I've broken the word care down to communication, accountability, respect, and execution. And if you care enough to focus on those things, you'll have a good chance of having the whole team all vectored in, a word Michael Reese loves to use, all vectored in on the right target. And it starts, so I said questions. Questions are where it's at. I took a minute just to kind of think some of the questions that I ask team members, questions that I know other people ask team members that really bring people in and create communication that otherwise wouldn't exist. There are things like me asking my team members how I can help. How can I help? Something as simple as that. And see what goes up on the board. You'd be amazed. How am I doing? When's the last time that you've asked your team how you're doing? We got a meeting every day, every week to talk about how they're doing. And we're no short on a list of things that they could probably do better. But how many times are we asking, how are we doing? What would you do in a situation? This is funny. So I was talking to my buddy the other day. He was, he was over here talking about, he has a brother who's about 15, and this guy, Vladimir, he's Russian, and he's an opera singer, and he comes from his family as opera singers, and he has a brother who's 15, and he's in this private opera school program and so on. And his brother, this was on Saturday, was in New York for some like $2,500 opera boot camp thing. And his brother got mono, and he was on the phone with them, and his brother was really upset. Man, they're going to make me go home because they're worried about me getting other people sick and so on. And his brother said, well, here's the deal. Just tell them that you'll quarantine yourself, in your room for a few days, and let's see what the doctor says. If it gets better, whether or not you're still contagious, but don't have them send you home yet, because there's a chance maybe that you'd be all right and you stay in the program, right? And he comes back and he's like, I just love those moments where I get a chance to be a big brother. And, I think I did pretty good. I was trying to just let him know, keep his head up. I could hear he was getting frustrated. And what do you think? And I said, I think it's great, man. I said, the only thing I would have said is, you're telling me, you told him what to do, tell him this. I said, I would have just asked him first, maybe, what would you do? And see if he comes up with that answer on his own. See if he can formulate the solution. Maybe he comes up with the same answer you just said, and you get to be like, man, right on. And so just going back to my question is what would you do? John, we got a problem here we're trying to solve. I'm curious, what would you do? And allow that communication. Somebody might have a better idea. Somebody's looking at it from a better perspective. And what does all this do? It brings your team inside the fold. It brings them in the battle tent. If you watch Game of Thrones, there's those scenes where, they're in a dark room and they got a big map and they're planning the war. Well, guess who's not in that room? The guy who's out holding the sword on the front line. That guy who's who's running the risk of death is not in that room. Right. Planning whether or not we're going to flank or not. What if he was? Like, I'd love to have him in that room so he'd have a vested interest when he's out on the battlefield. And so bringing your team in, I think, asking questions like that helps a lot.
Man, it is. And that really is, a couple things from a transition when, we start to the game changes. We talk about it when you've got about 4 or 5 people under your care, the game changes. You're playing, the thing that you have to realize is that it's the same board. It's just a different game, right? It goes from checkers to chess. Same board, same number of little squares, same little everything, but our pieces change. And it changes about 4 or 5 employees. Our team members are people that are kind of under your your direction, under your vision, under what it is that, you're really, the cause or whatever it is that you guys are chasing at that point. And you nailed it, man. It is question to statement ratio, and really being super conscious and aware of, am I making more statements than I am with questions? And when you can make that transition, and, it's 80-20, man. If you can get to 80% questions and 20% statement, man, you talk about a game changer within your people when you're really, allowing, and the thing, Jeff, is what's happening is that you're conditioning them to think, and you're conditioning them to solve problems. I remember the team back in Lawton, man, they used to like, they knew what I was going to say. Right. And I did it, man. I did it I didn't do it intentionally. I did it out of, I just ain't got time to talk to you right now. That's how this was born. And they would come with hey, a situation, a challenge. And, like most people, and I mean, it's just how, we're born, we're being fed, right? We're being given the answer. And so, we're just conditioned to come and get the answer. And I would, every time, man, I said, that's a great question. What are 3 solutions? Like, I don't know. I said, well, why don't you figure out 3 solutions and come back and tell me? And I mean, that was, yeah. And it was like, what it did is it made them think, right? We created a culture and environment of problem solvers. And you know what happened? Over about 60, 90 days, man, I didn't get those God minutes. I didn't get people coming knocking on my door because they knew what I was going to say. And, we really instilled, the bookends of the day in the office with the morning huddle and the end of the day reports. And so what I started noticing on the end of the day reports were the challenges that they had and how they solved it. Right. So they started thinking, they started problem solving, and we just created that amazing culture. And it's not that I don't want to, to help, but I don't want them to be dependent upon me. They're a creative, right? It's, you either believe that it's a report, a reportive world, or it's a creative world. I know you believe it's a creative world. I believe it's a creative world. And the more space and the more that you allow somebody to think and solve problems, the more creative they're going to be. And, are they going to make mistakes? Are they going to do things? Sure. So what are some of the things that you can put in place that would be extremely beneficial to allow them to know the decisions that they can make? And a great little analogy or just a visual was establish the water line. Establish the water line within your business, meaning if we take a shot to the boat and it's above the water line, the boat's not going to sink. Now we take a torpedo under the water line, yeah, the boat could go down. And so what it is that we need to establish that water line. So I'll give you an example. We did this with Tracy when she was running contract to close for us in the Lawton office, and she was running operations, overseeing our closing department, and we gave her the water line, meaning in the closing department, if it was under X number of dollars to solve a situation or solve a repair or solve a problem or close the gap to get the deal closed, like she had the ability to call that shot. Like she didn't need to come knock on my door. She didn't need to go talk to anybody else. She could just make that decision and go because she knew we established a water line, right? She knew that where the organization was, she knew the decision. She knew that it wasn't going to sink the ship. It could have put a little hole in the top of the boat, but it wasn't going to be a torpedo under the water line. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key thing with your people, being able to give them some of the autonomy to be able to make better decisions within the organizations. They feel empowered. They feel a part of the cause. I think there's one key thing that leads into that. And that is, creating an environment of transparency. right? When somebody has clarity and insight to really what's going on in the organization, you can give them autonomy to make decisions. Where we see, people getting tripped up and saying, man, that stuff don't work. That don't work. Man, they just make the wrong decisions. And the reason is that they're making the best decisions with the information they have. Do you think your people would make better decisions if they understood all the facts of the organization, if they understood the facts of the financial health of the organization? Do you think that they would make better decisions based upon that? Absolutely they would. 100% they would. But that's where people get messed up. They want to give people autonomy, but they don't want to give them the transparency to really what's going on. And that's where people get messed up. And so I think those are some key things when you're really, building your team, building your organization, and really getting everybody to rally behind and grow, that you've got to have there. Definitely, man. I think the biggest one is leading with questions, giving them some transparency into really what is going on, and giving them the autonomy to make decisions that are above the waterline that you've established.
I think you brought up, the water line's a great analogy, man. It is a great analogy, understanding like what is fatal, to the mission at hand, and what's just a casualty of, war, so to speak. But it is autonomy with analysis, right? I mean, if you have to be involved in every decision, it's not a scalable business, right? And so you want to have people that you trust can make decisions on their own. Like you said, they need to understand all the facts, which is why you bring them in the goal-setting process.
Yep.
So many people don't bring people that are so important to the goal into the meeting where the goal is being set. And
Yep.
just, these people come out of a meeting, lunch is this conference room scattered with sandwich wrappers and everything. and a small group of people come out and then go tell everybody, here's what you're going to do. And those people weren't in the room. They don't have all the facts. They don't have the full picture. Some of the things that they might be thinking, they don't realize we discussed that. What you think is a great idea, we actually hashed out and unpacked in a room. And that's why we decided to do what we're doing right now. When you have a difference of opinion, when you have somebody in your office who thinks it should be done this way and you think it should be done this way, do they know that you were in a meeting and had a discussion where you actually vetted out their idea? They don't know because you didn't bring them in, and they're not fully bought in to the process unless they are present during the creation of it and they accept allegiance to it, right? I mean,
right.
So that's how then you empower them, I think, with those facts. And you want them to make decisions on their own. You also empower them with the right questions to ask themselves. When we started off our morning huddles every day by saying, what's your one big thing? Everybody got accustomed to knowing that they need to identify one big thing that they're going to accomplish today, because you're going to be asked what that one big thing is at 8:45 in the morning or whatever time it was. And so you're training your team then to ask the right questions. We always talk about a lot right now is what I am doing right now. Is what I'm doing right now focused on the right thing, right? Is what I'm doing right now contributing to the goal? If you teach your team to ask that question and you build that in, get a laminated card that represents your organization's culture and print the 10 questions on it that your team members ask themselves every day. Is what I'm doing right now working on is moving us towards the goal? If your team knows to ask that question, they're in a much better position to use that autonomy the right way, right? And then you do have to analyze it. Like you said, you had bookends on each day. And so it's not about autonomy where there's, no consequences or no consideration for the outcome. So you analyze everything and you do it on a daily basis so that the effects of multiple mistakes can't compound.
Absolutely, man. And it allows you to not let things go more than 24 hours without coming to an attention to where we can have a conversation on it. you were talking a little bit earlier, from a communication standpoint. I think that's absolutely critical. If you've got somebody for some reason that's not in the room, you got to think about coming out of any meetings where decisions are being made is how you're going to cascade that communication down to the rest of the team. How are they going to know and why that decision was made, right? What was the rationale for that? I think that's where a lot of people miss that step. They get in a hurry and they think it's, only skipping steps only presents the illusion of speed. And so they're like, oh yeah, well, I don't have time to sit here and communicate it. Well, guess what? When that person leaves because you didn't take the time to communicate, the decision-making, why we're making certain decisions, why we're doing things within the organization, then you're going to have that time to replace them. So is it better to take the time and communicate and articulate why the decision was made because of how it aligns to the overall objective that we're trying to accomplish? Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. I mean, 10 times out of 10, you're gonna take that extra time versus having to go back through the hiring process to replace them. And so, those are absolutely key things. Leading our organizations, leading our people, come down to communication, how we're allowing them to make decisions. I think the biggest thing, this is still from a self leadership standpoint, but I think it's absolutely key that, we're modeling the behavior that we want to instill into our team. How are we showing up? If we're showing up unprepared, if we're showing up, distracted, our team's going to show up unprepared. Our team's going to show up distracted until you find somebody that doesn't care for that type of behavior and then they leave. Mm-hmm. So those are all key things to be aware of and to be thinking about. I think the other thing too, Jeff, that I really want to hit home on, and this is one of the key, foundational elements as it pertains to, leading other people and really leading and building your team is, clear agreements versus expectations. We talk about it a lot. And, any time that you have an expectation with another human being, you're going to be let down 100% of the time. And, we've talked about this, on probably previous episodes. We're going to talk about it on future episodes. It's something that is just absolutely foundational in anything and everything you do, in any type of relationship that you have with another human being. Is establish crystal clear agreements. I believe a lot of people, Jeff, have agreements, but they're super muddy. They're not clear. And what are we looking for from clear? We're looking for exactly what it is that somebody is going to do. When are they going to do it by? And how are we going to know they got it done, right? Those are the 3 pillars of accountability. Are what are you going to do? When are you going to get it done by? And how am I going to know you got it done? I think a lot of people do good with the first 2. What are you going to do? When are you going to get it done by? But they miss that 3rd step, man. They miss, how am I going to know you got it done? And it's a simple question. It's just like if you and I were just sitting here conversating, and you're like, hey man, I'm going to set up this, this call to action text. I'm going to get it all set up. I'm going to tinker with it tonight. And I'm going to have it done for first thing in the morning. And then I'd be like, cool, man, when can I see it? How am I going to know you got it done? You're going to be like, oh, cool, man, I'll just shoot you the text in the morning. So cool. So I'll be able to see it at 8 o'clock. Yeah, 8 o'clock. In fact, when we talk at 9:30, I'll walk you through it. Okay, cool. So we got a clear agreement. Jeff's going to set up this cool little call to action texty thing that is going to help us on conversions. He's going to work on it tonight, and he's going to have it done by 9:30 in the morning when he's going to walk me through it. That's a clear agreement. And so that's just a small example, but that's the same principle even on longer term agreements that we're wanting to put in place. You've got to have that level of detail. You got to check the box in all 3 of those elements. If not, your agreements are muddy. They're not clear.
Well, a lot of people have proposals, and let me tell you what I mean. A lot of people have proposals. What's the ultimate agreement? You want to talk about who's unclear and the effects of not having agreement? Look at your relationships. Look at boyfriend and girlfriend relationships. There's an expectation that exists that we're devoted to each other. We're going to be there for each other. I love you. You love me. I trust you. You trust me. I'll do anything for you, vice versa. Those are expectations. And why does a woman after 10 years get tired of, because she wants an agreement by you that those are more than expectations. And when
100%.
When you get married, you have vows that clearly articulate what that agreement is, even down to the time frame, which is till death do us part. That's what I'm agreeing to, right? And so, and it's so what we have a lot is proposals. When you got down on the knee and you asked Holly to marry you, you had a proposal. And a lot of us propose a bunch of shit, but we don't always get, yes, John, I will, back.
Right.
So make sure that you're not just making proposals. Hey, team, let's get out there and crush it today. I want everybody to make 100 contacts to everybody in their database today. Let's go crush it. Well, I got down on my knee and I said, will you? But I didn't get yes. As far as I know, I got somebody who's going to leave me at the altar. You know?
I mean, and I want you to finish that, but I think the key point in there is, man, get clear on what the words mean, right? Like you talk about vows, this, that, the other. Yeah, but I mean, if I'm not crystal clear on what those vows and those words specifically mean, and I get clear, like even with Holly, what do we both agree what those words mean? She might have her interpretation and I have mine, right? So I think that's a key lesson in there when we're talking about that's still muddy. If we didn't get clear on what those words mean to me, what they mean to her, and that we come to an agreement what they mean together. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of people get tripped up, and that's the ego, is that they don't want to be wrong when they don't understand something. So like, you know, for like, you know, you and I sitting here and you're, you know, like if I don't understand what a word means, I remember, man, I used to be like that. I didn't want to be the guy in the room that would be wrong. You would say a word, I'm like, oh yeah, I got that. Yeah. And I had no freaking clue what you were talking about.
Right.
But, you know, as you get to that point that you're like, dude, I need clarity. I need to know what am I signing my name up for here? I want to know what the words mean. And, man, you got to trip and fall on your face a couple times and get burnt. And, you know, you do that a couple times. You get tripped up on clarity of what things mean. You won't make that mistake too many times.
Well, it goes back to being humble, being willing to be wrong, being open to how something could be different. All those things like you talked about, being in a learner mindset. It was once said that it is much better to be thought misinformed than to be proven uninformed. So if you don't know, ask. Actually, in most cases, that does well for you. Makes you look better. It builds
100%.
It builds a better. I know people that say they don't know just on purpose, just because they know that the power that exists in saying, I don't know, tell me a little bit more about that, actually builds a greater bond and allows them to better influence whoever it is that they're talking to, whether it's somebody on their team or it's a prospect. So never be afraid to say, I don't know, and ask, because it looks a whole lot worse when they find out that you really don't know and you didn't have the courage to just come out and say it. And
that's a great point, man. I'm glad you shared that.
And one thing I also wanted to talk about, but it goes so often unnoticed or not, you know, implemented into the culture with leadership, is recognition and rewards. You know, everybody wants to be rewarded for a job well done, and everybody craves recognition. Everybody does. There's a great story about John Wooden, the basketball coach for UCLA, where he had a teammate. You know, one of their rules was that any time, let's say that a player passes you the ball, so he got an assist and you scored, on the way back down, you make sure to find that player who passed you the ball, so who got the assist, and say, you know, great job, thank you. And a player said, well, what if we're running back and that player isn't looking? And John Wooden said, they'll always be looking. Always. They'll always. And think about that. Hell yeah, I know that. I've been that person on that court looking back. And you do it just inherently, right? When you make the shot, if you pass to me, good job. I try to dap you out on the way back on the back court. Nobody taught me to do that, really. I mean, it just kind of, maybe unconsciously we've absorbed it over the years, but they're always looking. Your team member is looking. They're always looking. Just 1 second to say, literally, I get, every time we convert a lead for an agent.
That fist bump. Thank you.
Every time, even if I'm not there, every time we convert a lead for an agent in our call center, I get the notification just like the agent. And so I know if Shady's having a great day because I saw her get 5 leads that came through, or whoever. And just as simple as sending a thumbs up goes a long way.
It's huge.
So getting to talking about leadership and really getting your people really behind you and all in, don't forget to reward and recognize them for what they do.
Absolutely.
So we covered a lot today, Kitchens, man. I think we'll end today's episode and plan for the next one. I sure appreciate you. Any final words?
Man, leadership is a skill, and anything that is a skill can be developed, and it just takes the effort and the work and the seeking and the studying and the knowledge and putting it into practice. And it is definitely one of the number one things that'll serve you over the course of your life in whatever you do. And in this business, there's really gets to a point, there's the two most critical things that you do, and it's leadership and listings, and definitely to be taken serious. So hopefully you guys got a ton of value out of today's call, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode.
Yep, got to have the skills to pay the bills, and you can get them at KendaReeseCoaching.com, by the way. So check out KendaReeseCoaching.com if you want to get them skills and get rid of the bills. Until the next time, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Got it. See ya.
To find out how to build a 7-figure real estate business in 3 years or less, go to KendaReeseCoaching.com. You've been listening to the Growth Guys Podcast. If you want us to help you grow your real estate business, go to KendaReeseCoaching.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the Growth Guys Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast fix to get new, fresh weekly episodes. Catch you next time on the Growth Guys Podcast.